pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. I am the chair of the Planning Commission, Tyler McCloskey, and we'll go on down all the way to my right for introductions.
Wayne Wright, Planning Commissioner.
Tiffany Mitchell, Planning Commissioner.
Annette Stewart, Planning Commissioner.
Stephanie Bailey, Planning Commissioner.
Paul Fontenot, Planning Commissioner.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
Dennis Ryan, Public Works Director.
Fitzy Bethea, Planning Intern.
Connor Dahlquist, Associate Planner.
And it looks like online we have Nick.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director.
Thanks, everybody. All right, we will go on to business item number 3, audience comments. Is there anybody online?
There is nobody online.
There's nobody in the room. So we will move on to business item number 4, the approval of the minutes from October 7th. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I move we accept them as presented.
We have
Second.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes pass as written. All right, moving into business items 5A, open up the public hearing for co-living housing House Bill 1998.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this. Prior to opening a public hearing on co-living ordinance, first introduced to the Planning Commission in October, we'll describe the proposed development regulation amendments related to House Bill 1998, which was passed in March 2024. This legislation introduces and defines a new housing type, co-living housing, and requires jurisdictions like Port Orchard to take specific steps to enable its development. What is co-living housing? Co-living housing consists of individually rented lockable sleeping units with private living space while sharing kitchen facilities. It's designed to offer affordable rental options for moderate to low income individuals without relying on public subsidies. Historically, co-living has served single person households, seniors, and those seeking a more social or cost-effective alternative to traditional rentals. It's important. HB 1998 recognizes co-living as a tool to address Washington's housing affordability crisis. It is intended to support adaptive reuse of existing buildings, such as the Amici House at DeKalb and Harrison here locally. It may help reduce demand for family-sized units and eases pressure on subsidized housing. House Bill 1998 requires that cities permit co-living housing on any lot that allows 6 or more multifamily units, including mixed-use zones. Co-living must be treated equitably in terms of development standards and review procedures. In Port Orchard's case, we would not be allowed to require conditional use permit. Cities cannot impose requirements beyond state building code standards for room sizes or unit configurations. Parking requirements are limited. The Planning Commission did do quite a bit of work on parking standards as part of the middle housing ordinance. The HB 1998, it states that no off-street parking is required within a half mile of a major transit stop. Elsewhere, no more than 0.25 spaces per sleeping unit. As far as density and fees, density calculations, each sleeping unit counts as only 1/4 of a dwelling unit. For sewer connection fees, each sleeping unit counts as half of a dwelling unit. For example, in the R3 district, it allows 6 multifamily dwellings. Actually, it allows more than 6 multifamily dwellings, but the unit density in the R3 district is 6. A co-living development could include up to 24 sleeping units. Port Orchard must adopt amended development regulations by December 31st, 2025. If we do not act, House Bill 1998 overrides any conflicting local regulations. These amendments were reviewed by the Planning Commission at the October meeting and are based on Department of Commerce guidance. They include changes to 2012 and definitions, where we clarify co-living and ensure it doesn't bypass multifamily standards. In 2032, building types, We've updated apartment classifications to 6 or more units for consistency with the bill. 20.39, the use provisions, we've consolidated several uses into group living, and we've clarified some multifamily thresholds in mixed use buildings. In 20.124, the parking and circulation, we've included a new use for co-living to distinguish sleeping units from dwelling units. Since you've seen this last in October, and it is in your packet, and I sent it to you immediately following the October meeting, the congregate living facility, current definition, we've removed location-based criteria to avoid conflict with the bill. Congregate care facility, we've added a definition which is aligned with the standard industrial classification system. We've included some kind of helpful things as far as definitions navigation. This is intended to improve usability by organizing definitions alphabetically under their own subsection. Apartment unit threshold, we've lowered that from 7 to 6. Multifamily definition, we've updated that to be 6 or more for consistency with the bill. Mixed use buildings, we've clarified that multifamily use may begin at 2 units in applicable zones. And we've added footnotes to reinforce minimum unit counts for multifamily. On October 8th, the city issued a determination of non-significance. We've not received any comments related to the DNS. We've transmitted the amendments to the Department of Commerce also on October 8th. We did receive one comment from Commerce requesting a reference to the definition of a major transit stop in the revised Code of Washington. So we have included that in tonight's packet. And we have noticed tonight's public hearing properly consistent with POMC 20.25. So we're hopeful after public testimony and deliberation, the Planning Commission is able to forward a recommendation to the City Council. We're tentatively scheduling council action for the November 18th meeting. And I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jim. Go ahead and open the public hearing if there's anyone online at this time.
There's nobody online raising their hand.
Okay, we can go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up for discussion and questions. And we'll start on my right.
No, nothing further.
Nothing further from me.
I'm good. Nothing.
Yeah, I have nothing further since the October meeting.
I will entertain a motion.
I move we accept it as proposed and prepared and send it on to the City Council.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, passes on. We'll go ahead and move on to 5B, a presentation about tree canopy ordinance.
Okay, so we're going to tag team this. Dennis Ryan, the Public Works Director, is here. He'll speak to many of these slides, and I'll speak to a few. Connor is going to share the presentation here. This is included in your packet, so you can follow along if you have a hard copy or on your laptop.
Good evening, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here tonight before you. Please feel free to ask questions as I move through this. And if I go too fast, don't hesitate to ask for clarification. So I am here to speak tonight about a new requirement of our current Phase 2 permit for Western Washington stormwater compliance. I'll just go to the next slide, please. So what is the NPDES? It's the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System permit. It's what governs our operations, everyday operations in planning, development, and even our maintenance for the city. It's driven by the Clean Water Act of 1972. Federal level permit regulates stormwater discharges to surface waters. That's particularly important here on Sinclair Inlet with the direct discharge into the Sound. Washington State Department of Ecology is the regulatory agent that administers and oversees and monitors our permit. We do an annual permit that we submit to the state each year for compliance. The city of Port Orchard falls under the Western Washington Phase 2, as I mentioned. There's a few Phase 1 permit holders. They're usually the larger population centers in the state. It's important to know that Once you're a phase 1 or phase 2 permit, you're always a phase 1 or phase 2 permit. Cities that are close to some of the largest cities in the state of Washington now that were previously a phase 2 permit, like Vancouver, Washington, will always be a phase 2 permit. So that is the same as the requirements for Port Orchard, Washington. We'll go to the next slide. So the MPDS has a tree canopy requirement. There's things that we have to do, a policy that adopts and implements the tree canopy goals, policies to support the stormwater management, establish a long-term 5 to 10 year goal of canopy existing or future projections to be used to stormwater management on city-owned properties. We'll have to consider how existing or future tree canopies can support stormwater management and water quality improvements in receiving waters. And then finally, specific considerations shall include maintaining or increasing canopy in overburdened communities and maintaining existing mature tree canopies. So why do the tree canopies matter for stormwater? There's a pretty good graphic here that if you can see it, but I'll walk us through here. Urban tree canopies is a natural stormwater filter. Trees intercept the rainfall, they reduce the runoff, and they improve the water infiltration. Canopy covers helps filter pollutants. I'm sorry, I already said that. The tree roots stabilize our soils and they reduce erosions. The ecological benefits improves water quality in receiving waters, supports habitat and biodiversity, and enhances community resilience to climate change. So trees are our filters that filter the water that end up ultimately in Sinclair Inlet. So this is just some interesting statistics on how trees store and filter water. One single tree can accumulate up to 4,000 gallons of rainfall per year. A single mature tree intercepts that. This reduces the volume of stormwater in entering the drains and it prevents localized flooding that you see in urban areas. A 25-foot tree canopy can manage runoff from about a 2,400 square foot impervious surface. So think of a single family home. One mature tree can filter that stormwater. And then reduction of stormwater runoff. Urban tree canopies can reduce stormwater runoff by up to 62%, especially when integrated with other green infrastructures. And I do want to note, so when we talk about urban tree canopies, we are in the Pacific Northwest, and the type of tree, the native trees, the conifers, those are the most effective for our area. There's many trees as planters, as public works, they look great on streetscapes, but some of them are drought tolerant, so it's not getting the same ecological benefit. So the next slide here is just the process of how we've been mapping. So each year the city puts in for a stormwater capacity grant through Department of Ecology, and we're usually successful. So with this new permit requirement, we purchased software called Nearmap, where we're able to use AI and identifying from layered GIS photography where we can identify these existing tree canopies. So step one was to identify the tree canopies in Port Orchard with this GIS tool. And then step two was to measure the total canopy coverage, tree height and density, and how the trees relate to pavement and drainage areas. And the third step was the inventory of tree canopies. And this hasn't been done yet. This is future state that we'll be working on, but we're prioritizing our goals. So the third step is we'll inventory our tree canopies that are located in the riparian corridors, bioretention areas, erosion prone areas, and the MS4 tributary basins. Our MS4 is our publicly owned stormwater conveyance system. And then finally, step four is to use the results to aid the city in planning stormwater projects and tree planting and preservation goals in the future. So here's a graphic for the entire city. This is a GIS tool, and again, it is Nearmap. So what we've mapped so far is 169.2 acres of tree canopy that are managed within the city right-of-way. The right-of-way is the publicly owned street, sidewalks that's adjacent to properties. Provide a baseline to aid in planning tree canopy, policies and goals that support stormwater management. Our next steps are to map canopy on the city-owned property. So in addition would be our parks, city hall, other facilities that we own throughout the city. Catalog the tree species and the diversity of trees. Analyze the canopy's impact on stormwater. So eventually we'll have an equation where we have X amount of acres of trees, type of trees. That equates to how much area of surface can be treated by these trees that are currently existing. And I believe I'm turning it over to Jim with this next slide, but I do want to reiterate the NPDS Phase 2 permit, it's constantly changing. So what we see in today's requirements is going to obviously more likely become more stringent in the next permit period of 5 years. So that was it for me. Thanks, Jim.
We go to the next slide there, Connor. So I'm going to provide a quick overview of our current regulations in regard to preserving tree canopy. POMC 20.129, that's our significant tree ordinance. It provides a framework for protecting Port Orchard's tree canopy through regulation and some other standards. And some of the strengths of this portion of the code include clear definitions. It establishes precise criteria for what qualifies as a significant tree. Those are trees that are generally in good health, they're not dangerous, and they have a width of 18 inches in diameter at breast height. There are some incentives for preservation of significant trees. We encourage developers to retain significant trees through built-in incentives in the code, which supports our citywide canopy preservation goals. There's some construction period protections, which requires protective measures during construction, such as fencing, root zone avoidance, and designated tree protection zones. This is intended to safeguard trees on active development sites. There's some replacement and mitigation standards in 20.129. The replacement ratios, when a significant tree is removed, it depends on the diameter of the tree, how many replacement trees you have to plant in their place. That helps offset some environmental and aesthetic impacts. And it includes some detailed planting specifications for the replacement trees to promote that sustained ecological benefit and canopy coverage over time. There are some limitations to 20.129 though. It does provide some protections for significant trees, but there's several gaps that limit its effectiveness. The canopy equivalency replacement ratios do not guarantee that new plantings will match the mature canopy area or ecological function of removed trees. Post-construction protection, it's limited to the construction phase and with few safeguards against long-term damage from grading, utility installation, or other site modifications. The code lacks requirements for long-term monitoring, maintenance schedule, and enforcement to ensure replacement trees survive and thrive outside of a 2-year maintenance period. The planting standards don't promote native species or larger stock or diversity in those species. These factors are critical to accelerating canopy growth and improve resilience to pests and climate and stress. So there are some gaps in it. The standards really focus on mitigating tree loss rather than proactively expanding the canopy coverage. If we can go to the next slide here. This is McCormick Village Overlay District. This is separate than the significant tree ordinance, which applies citywide. This is a very localized spot. There are strong regulations within the MVOD, but again, it's only a small portion of Port Orchard. It's a proactive approach to preserving the neighborhood character and ecological benefits through the development of the site. Development sites within the MVOD must meet specific canopy coverage thresholds to maintain environmental quality and visual appeal. Tree planting is directed to complement site layout, streetscapes, parking areas, and open spaces and enhance shading and screening. The existing canopy is prioritized for retention, and replacement planting is required when the canopy is lost due to the development. Regulations include tree protection measures during construction and set clear expectations for installation and long-term maintenance. So while these standards are a model for some canopy management. It's important to recognize that they currently only apply within the MVOD, leaving the majority of Port Orchard without similar protections. So I think this next slide shows you the MVOD. It's that portion that is outlined in green near map through the tree canopy mapping exercise. I don't think it captured everything that's going to be retained there along Old Clifton, but there is a swath of property there that is intended to be preserved. They will need to plant to meet the standards, and that plan has already been approved. They just obviously in this aerial photograph, they've not gotten that far yet. There are some limitations to the MVOD tree canopy standards. It's a short-term focus, emphasizes on-site canopy coverage without ensuring that replacement or retained trees will deliver the equivalent mature canopy or benefits over time. It lacks requirements for long-term survival monitoring, ongoing maintenance, and enforcement to ensure newly planted trees reach maturity. The standards prioritize site-level compliance rather than targeting canopy growth in areas with heat vulnerability, stormwater needs, or equity concerns. The regulations do not require larger tree stock, native species, or species diversities. We already talked about that a little bit, and that improves resilience and to pests and climate stress. Tree protections are concentrated around the construction phase with few safeguards against long-term damage from grading or utility work. These limitations suggest a need for a broader, more strategic canopy policies that extend beyond the MVOD and support long-term tree canopy health across Port Orchard. So I'm going to turn it back to Dennis, and he can wrap this up.
So the canopy counts for clean water. The tree canopy is natural infrastructure. Trees intercept the rainfall. So this is just a summary. They are essential to the climate resilience and the ecological health of our environment here in Port Orchard and throughout the state of Washington. Port Orchard is making progress. We've mapped the 169 acres that we spoke of earlier, laying a groundwork for our NPDES compliance and our long-term planning goals, and preparing us for the future permit and the requirements that are going to come forward. We did, as Jim discussed, we have gaps that remain. Weak long-term maintenance and monitoring, limited strategic planting in high-need areas, and replacement trees may not match the mature tree canopy, as Jim discussed. Our next steps will complete the canopy mapping on city-owned properties, set measurable canopy goals, strengthen code and long-term custom outcomes, priorities, equity in stormwater sensitive areas. I'm happy to answer any additional questions, or Jim, did you?
Just a little bit more to add, not in the presentation, but planning and public works are going to work on this project together. It will require some code amendments that'll come before the planning commission. And in fact, the next item on the agenda is kind of an introduction to that. So Dennis, if you want to stick around, that'd be great. But yeah, we're excited, and we want to get the planning commission's feedback. But this presentation was just intended to let you know where these requirements are coming from.
Awesome. Thank you, Dennis and Jim.
May I be recognized?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, so that is the next part then. We're going to be talking about how you plan to address those shortcomings that exist in code changes.
That's the hope, yes.
Yes, okay, I'm happy about that. Thank you.
I've got a couple questions. You mentioned early on, Director, that there's a way of calculating the impact of the tree canopy on stormwater. I'm curious what that math looks like. Being a bit of an expert myself, I'm curious what you're using to figure this out.
You know, I do not have the answer to the exact methodology, but earlier in the slides, we did provide a graphic, and I think this is based off of industry. We're not the first agency to have this tree canopy requirement. So referring back, it was the 4,000 gallons that a mature tree could store a year. That's just a statistic. I can't tell you if that's an 80-foot conifer or
Right,
a
yeah, that's
40-foot
a,
maple tree.
okay, I'm just curious, but I will follow up later as we get closer to writing ordinance about what that math is. It's going to be important.
Yep, this is
Species matters, height matters.
absolutely. I would tell you that this is the best case scenario that we would shoot for.
Okay.
On the
I'm
plan.
okay with that, as long as we all know where you're at with your assumptions. Second couple questions I have, 169 plus some odd acres already mapped. That's pretty impressive, actually. How does that compare to the total acreage of city-owned property?
I don't have the statistics of how many acres we have in parks property. We have several lots throughout the city, reservoir sites that are substantial. Nick, Director Bond, do you have any idea what we own publicly?
Not that we own publicly. I can tell you what the total acreage of the city is, which is 6,400
This only
acres.
applies to city-owned pieces of property, correct? This NPDS permit.
Correct.
Right.
That's the first requirement. I would anticipate future requirements of the permit requirement. Our next cycle would be 2029. It's going to become more strict and a higher guideline to identify areas likely outside of the city.
Okay.
Ownership.
So like all the riparian corridors, buffers, wetlands, stuff like that will all get lumped into there.
It possibly could.
Okay. I'm curious also, when we're dealing with you mentioned a lot of 169 acres. It's mostly around road corridors or stormwater conduit, like ditches and stuff like that, I assume?
This statistic said just right away, so that would be the transportation corridor.
Transportation, all right. So species again matters. I mean, how many street cleaners do we have in this city?
What was the question?
How many street cleaners, sweepers, those vacuum trucks?
The city has 2 vacuum trucks and we have 2 street sweepers, one
Sweepers, yeah.
mechanical and one vacuum.
So I guess my point would be, we really don't want to see big leaf maples put everywhere, or we're going to need to get some more sweepers because they plug up the stormwater conduits pretty bad in November and December and January.
There are native species that are beneficial.
I'm just saying it's going to cost more money if we don't be careful with what species we promote to put into some of these areas. So just a thought. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments over here?
Generally, I think that it's moving in the right direction. I think that there are some significant gaps that you guys had mentioned that we really need to look at. I fear that, like with a lot of tree canopy legislation I've seen, it ends up just being like protecting individual trees that are large. Like, not to say that's not bad to protect the large trees, but it should be thought of more holistically in a more like ecosystem sense. One tree on its own that's being saved can't really survive all that well or do much in favor of the city if it's not within a larger ecosystem. So I think that that's a consideration we have to take in. I also had thought about the requirements that we have now being only city property and only on right-of-way corridors. That maybe farther in the future, you'd mentioned that would be the restrictions would be more stringent, and then we could consider that then. Considering the legislation that we've moved on to council and we've seen adopted in Port Orchard regarding other things, us sort of amending to state standards, I think it'd be positive to sort of get ahead of that. If there are potential more stringent standards that we can take those into consideration, those that we can adopt, that would be rather easy to. That way, when those stricter standards come along, I think we'd already be prepared for that. I think that would be a positive. In terms of the cost that it would take to, input certain trees that would be beneficial for the stormwater runoff and the environment of Port Orchard in general, I would argue that the cost of not protecting the environment would be much larger, especially for people who've had businesses along Bay Street and along other stormwater areas within Port Orchard. Knowing personally a few of those business owners, that they've had a heck of a time with a lot of the floods that have happened, especially along Bay Street. One of the more low-level flooding, but it's still enough to ruin somebody's day or business. So in terms of that, it's as Jim was saying, that it seems to be the limitation is it's a lot of short-term thinking, and I'd prefer to see more long-term planning in that regard. So just a few things to keep in mind.
And I would add, coming from other agencies, this is currently we don't have like a replacement tree policy that I'm aware of. Jim, you might be able to clarify, but we do best practices in public works where if we have to take a tree down on one of our pieces of property, I want to put 2 back. because it's going to take some time to get it back what we needed to.
Our significant tree ordinance 20.129 does have replacement ratios, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, those do apply in the right of way. But again, 18 inches is a fairly large tree. Significant tree.
Stephanie, Annette, any questions, comments?
No, I know.
All right. I look forward to hearing, discussing future code amendments. All right, moving on to 5C, discussion about landscaping, POMC 20.128. Jim?
Thank you. Tonight, we want to introduce a topic that'll be coming back to the Planning Commission in the months ahead. These are potential amendments to Port Orchard Municipal Code 20.128, which addresses landscape standards. No action is required this evening, but we're beginning the conversation so that we can gather your input early in the process. As you know, landscaping plays a role in shaping the look and feel of our neighborhoods. It defines streetscapes, buffers between uses, and influences how we manage stormwater and tree canopy. Our current code has some gaps and inconsistencies that have become more apparent through recent project reviews and coordination with Public Works. So we're looking at this. We've identified several recurring challenges. I'm just going to go off and name about 5 of them. Perimeter landscaping blocks visual and pedestrian connections between lots. There's no clear process for amending approved landscape plans. Open spaces that are mostly turf, they offer little ecological or recreational value, passive recreational value. There's persistent invasive species like Himalayan blackberry and Japanese knotweed, which we don't have a program to resolve other than through the county's noxious weed program. We have inconsistent landscape standards for middle housing compared to detached houses. We're looking to align these standards along with the NPDES stormwater obligations that we discussed in the tree canopy goals. And so we're aiming, we're still drafting the language, but some of the ideas that we are exploring is adding a purpose statement that emphasizes visual and pedestrian connectivity and discourages solid perimeter barriers unless it's needed for safety. We want to create a clear administratable process for amending the landscape plans, defining what counts as minor versus a major change. Align tree canopy and landscaping requirements with stormwater goals, including potential credits for preserved trees and clear replacement metrics. Clarify passive open space requirements to ensure they include meaningful vegetation, not just turf. Introduce enforceable standards for controlling priority invasive species, including monitoring and maintenance expectations. Revise buffer and perimeter standards to favor layered plantings, view corridors, and low fencing instead of continuous solid fencing. And then ensure middle housing types are treated equitably. As you know, we must treat middle housing the same as detached houses. This means that either we require landscaping for detached houses and we apply those same standards to middle housing, or we do not require landscaping for middle housing types at all and not to detached houses. So we anticipate this coming back in December. We're going to ask for your input and policy priorities and sequencing through the end of the year. And then in January, I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit. January or February, we'll prepare a draft ordinance and language, some illustrations and checklists. In May, we plan for you to review the draft and hear public comment. And then June and July, a public hearing where we'll ask you to make a recommendation to the city council. And then council, we would like to get this in front of council for review and adoption in early fall. So as we start drafting these amendments, we'd appreciate your feedback on a few areas. Namely, are we headed in the right direction with our focus on connectivity, clarity, and environmental alignment? Are there any additional objectives or concerns we should be considering? How should we address middle housing and detached houses? or there's other topics you'd like us to prioritize. So we'll return in February with the draft ordinance language for your review and discussion. In the meantime, we welcome your thoughts as we shape this next phase of Port Orchard's code, the landscaping standards. So if you'd like to submit some ideas or concerns via email to me, please feel free to do so over the next few months, hopefully by the end of the year. But yeah, this is just intended for you guys to, we have included the current landscape code in your packet, so you can take a look at that where we're standing now and give us some direction on where we need to go.
Awesome. Some more to come. Any comments, questions, anything to keep in mind?
Yeah, just a couple questions. How does this current landscape ordinance fit with the site development planning process? When somebody has a project, say, let's just pick on McCormick Woods a little bit. They got a big piece of property out there. They've basically been wiping all the trees out and going back and putting about homes, and they'll put back a few trees, a few rain gardens, and call it good for the day. The parks that they've left are all spindly alders, and they're falling down. The last windstorm, we had some significant loss. Are we going to integrate tree protection, even inventorying them on site development applications in the future? Or is that there already now? I don't think it is.
So first, let me address the McCormick Woods issue. There are several development agreements out there that vest them to old standards, even county standards.
Yeah, I know they're
So generally speaking, when somebody comes in with a subdivision or something like that, we do require a landscape plan, but the only trees that we can actually require are those replacement trees for any significant trees that are removed. This is problematic when you have a heavily vegetated site, a forested site, because it requires a forester, an arborist, I suppose, to go out there and inventory every tree that's on site and then calculate those replacement values. It's difficult when you have a very forested site to find a place to put all those trees. Now, we do have requirements for on-site recreation space, both active and passive. So there's opportunity to put trees there. And then we do require street trees, which count toward those replacement figures. But if they can't meet those standards, the replacement standards, there's really nowhere else to put the trees. The code does allow you to put it on public land, but there really isn't any public land that can accommodate those trees. So for a subdivision, we do require the landscape plan. We're just looking at it to see that it mostly fits the requirements of 20.128. It's then at the land disturbing activity permit where we actually look into it, and that applies to commercial development, multifamily, where we're ensuring that the plantings that they're putting in meet what is in the code.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments for Jim?
You'd mentioned prioritizing other things other than just turf grass for landscaping. As of right now, I mean, I know there's more to come, and as we see in the next few months, we'll probably see more of it. But do we have anything specifically in mind? I'm assuming you guys are referring to like xeriscaping, to where like it'd be mostly native plants and native things.
I missed the first part of your question. Can you repeat it?
Were in one of the requirements, or one of the desires, I wouldn't say requirements, but one of the goals of like maybe trying to prioritize other things other than turf grass for landscaping in the requirements?
Well, I think there's a difference between, when you're talking about open space, there's a difference between passive open space and active open space. And so what we want to avoid is having passive open space not provide any ecological benefit. And so just planting grass somewhere that's passive doesn't achieve that goal. But there's nothing in the code that strictly prohibits that right now. So one of the things we're looking at is how do we make these passive open space tracts more ecologically beneficial, and to kind of go in line with the tree canopy goals of the NPDES permit, even though it would be on private property.
Cool, thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on.
I got one more thing to.
Yes.
One more thing to add, Jim and Dennis. There's a group in town, Port Orchard here, they want to bring back, they're bringing back the redwoods, the coastal redwoods, the large sequoias and large redwoods. And they're actually selling these trees locally. They're coming in about 3, 4, 5 feet tall, but they take a long time to grow, but they become significant trees. So getting into the whole prioritization, if there's a spot where you want to put something like that, there is somebody, Alan Marshall is his name, and he's here in Port Orchard here. And he's working with Nature Conservancy and many other groups to bring these big trees back, big substantial evergreens. And they have good root systems that don't blow over when the wind takes them. So just something to remember.
Is that within the city limits?
He lives in the city limits. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and so replacement trees, they need to, and we've come across this in the past, where there's places out in unincorporated Kitsap where it may be available to plant. But the code requires it to be within the city limits.
Yeah.
So
He's selling these trees for anywhere. I'm trying to get him to put them in McCormick Woods to just bring back some structure.
All right, 5D, the director's report. Is that Nick?
I don't have anything to report tonight.
All right, and on that, we can go ahead and adjourn. I will see everybody at the December 2nd meeting. Thank you all.
Bye.